I was kind of emotional a little bit because the feeling was if we closed down the company, it would have been the first time in my corporate life I had declared defeat. I couldn't turn it around.
Welcome to the Game of Impossible podcast. My name is Leon. This is my dad, Idris Jala. We are a father-son podcast where we discuss all things transformation through the lens of business, leadership, sport, as well as faith. Today, in episode 30, we want to talk a little bit about crisis management. We were en route to Johor recently for a conference. And on the flight, I think Daryl, who's your special officer, we were talking about the fear of flying. And then that led us to think about, actually, if you were still in the airline, imagine having to deal with the crisis, the potential crisis of losing an aircraft. And then you started telling us about some of your crisis comms training at Shell. And I thought it was just a really interesting topic and maybe something that we could spend a bit of time discussing today.
I think it's very relevant in this day and age. We face so many types of crises in family, in businesses, in countries.
Exactly. And I mean, one of the more recent big crises that was in the news, and this was last year, was the Titan X submersible. And the reason why that comes to mind today is because they found even more of the wreckage in the ocean, and I think that was just in today's news. So I mean, large-scale crisis. And I think some of the stuff that you shared the other day and that you will share today, it speaks into how do you manage a large-scale public crisis like that. But I think it's also very much applicable in a smaller scale as well. Whether or not you're talking about a big-scale crisis, there are always going to be problems that you need to tackle as well and difficult conversations to be had.
What you need to do to prepare for the crisis, I mean, that's very, very important. I think the first thing that you have to do, whether you are a leader of a country or a leader of an organization, you have to get everything sorted out and prepared for it. The first thing you must do is to have a crisis policy and standard operating procedure. If in an organization you don't have such a document, you are already going to be in trouble the moment a crisis hits you. So in this...
How does this look like?
It looks like this. The policy begins with an assessment of the risk metrics that the organization is going to face. There is a 2x2 assessment. First one is the impact, and that's the vertical axis, and the horizontal axis is the likelihood of it happening. So you then say, if there's a very high impact on people, on the business, on environment, on property and assets, that is something that you have to really think about. If it's likely going to happen, then you really have to put tremendous emphasis on it. But nonetheless, everything in the northeast quadrant of that matrix is the one that you really have to take charge of and be prepared for it. And so once you've done that in itself, the risk-based matrix will inform you on the levels of crisis management, The small ones are at the departmental level. If the crisis is very small, it's within the department. You, as the CEO or the leader of the organization, you don't have to tackle that. You leave them to do it. Then it moves to the intermediate level or the manager level, and finally the CEO. At the country level, it could be department head, it could be the permanent secretary or the minister, and finally the top level is the prime minister or the president, because that impacts in the nation. In each of these levels, there is already a clear team of people already identified to tackle it. The moment you say level 1, you know exactly who in level 1 is going to be pulled into do. You don't start scattering for people. They are already trained. If it's level 2 and you know who the people will be assembled, level 3, which is at the top level tier, and you know exactly who is going to do it. And these people are properly trained to handle the crisis in the SOP. There's step-by-step things that they need to do. So without the document, so any listeners out there, if your company and your organization does not have a crisis management policy and a standard operating procedure, you're going to be in trouble the moment you have the crisis, because you start looking for assembling a team, you don't even know the steps of how to do it. And when you are in a crisis, no time to do any of those things. The house is on fire, you got to douse the fire before you even think. So crisis is something that is so important, it's so urgent and immediate. There's no time to think. So if you haven't got that ready, right now you better start doing it.
Yep. So the pre-preparation
Very
helps
important.
you to respond quicker
Yeah.
because you're able to then anticipate different
Absolutely.
levels of
Different
problems
levels.
and then different levels of response as well for
Absolutely.
each problem. And I think
Yeah.
what you mentioned about the speed there, speed of response and urgency is important. I mean, first of all, we generally want to be quick to respond to things.
Yeah.
But, Simon Sinek said people don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
think the urgency and speed of response is actually an indication of the fact that you, as a leader or as an organization, are taking the issue seriously
Absolutely.
to
And
respond quickly.
Absolutely, Leon. If you are not prepared and you don't know what actions to take, it will show on your face.
Yes.
It will show on the fact that you already look panicky. In a crisis, if the leaders are panicky and they are not calm and collected, there's no confidence. You must look completely cool and calm and prepared for it in handling it, because that brings confidence. That people know that you are on top of it all. Although down below you may be like a duck, paddling very, very hard underwater, but on the surface, because you know the steps, you know exactly what you're going to do.
So, easier said than done, being calm and collected when you're dealing with massive, a big crisis, and especially in, let's say, in a more public setting,
Yeah.
In the context of, let's say, an ambush interview, having to do a press conference, you know that you want to be calm and collected, but in times like this, what are some practical ways to ensure that you stick to the script and that you remain calm?
You're absolutely spot on, Leo. Use the word ambush. Ambush is, although you are quite ready for it, you wouldn't really, you didn't expect them to turn up. Let's say an explosion took place at your plant, 5 people have died, and you just got a call from the plant manager that the explosion has happened in your factory and 5 people have died. You step outside your office, ready to go to the site. The media is already there. That's an ambush. Television crews, everybody there. Everybody is outside there. This time round, the thing to do is the 5 C's. You must be prepared to do 5 things. And by the way, Leon, because you're in ambush, although you're ready for it, you will forget because emotions are there. People are screaming and shouting. The television crews, the cameras are all haunting you right outside your door. So I've been trained to do this when I work in Shell. There are 5 things you need to do, the 5 C's. And because the environment can be very tense, you can forget the order of those things, even the number of things. So the suggestion is to take this, put it behind you, just like this.
You should
and
turn back to the turn back to the mic.
So what you do is you hold your hand, your fingers behind your back. When you hold it behind your back, and
So
each
5
time the
fingers
5 things,
behind your
and you
back.
hold them one by one, so that you're reminding yourself. The first one is called C. C means to confirm. So you hold this. You would say, I confirm that an explosion took place at my plant, and that 4 people have died. Then you put out your finger on the second one. Is now to convey the condolence, the second C. On behalf of the company, I would like to really express my condolence to the families of the 5 people that have died as a result of the explosion. The next C, that's cooperation. We will cooperate fully with authorities for the investigation with regards to this explosion that took place. Then the next C, the 4th C, is to commit. Ladies and gentlemen, I commit that at 4 o'clock tomorrow, I will hold a press conference to be able to give you information about the explosion. The last one is to conclude. Ladies and gentlemen, you will appreciate that there's an explosion out there and I have an emergency meeting that I need to attend. Immediately walk. In Malay, we call it to cabut, which is the last C. But really, do not answer the questions because you don't have any facts. And people will understand that if there's an emergency, they will understand why you have to go to the emergency. So do not answer the question, walk.
I find that very useful. First of all, because there's such a practical element to it, putting your 5 fingers behind your back. Because there's been so many cases. I mean, I've not had to practice a 5 C's like this, but there's been many other instances where I know the exact script in my head.
Yeah.
But then because the environment is maybe a little overwhelming, it's very easy to actually get
very
sidetracked. And especially in the area of dealing with speculative questions, I mean, you can't avoid that those kinds of questions are going to come. And if you don't have a clear sense of what are the key objectives and the key things you need to say, as well as the boundaries for what you say and what you don't say, it will be quite easy to get swept away and to answer those questions.
When I was in Shell, we were trained to do this. In the training, there was a video of every one of us who were learning. And then after you've done, they taught you how to do the 5 C's. And when they showed the video, first of all, some people don't even remember all the 5 C's. And they get the order wrong as well. So if the order is wrong, that's another thing. And the third one, they don't look cool and confident. You must show calm and being collected and confidence. Very little emotion. The only time you will look emotional, you tone down, they will tell you when you talk about conveying condolence. You lower your voice and you speak slowly. And so that's part of the thing that they do.
Again, you can know the script, you can have your 5 fingers behind your back to make sure you're on track. But how do you control what goes on, what's showing in your face? For me personally, I think what I have found useful in the last couple of years, being comfortable to acknowledge what you don't know. I think sometimes we can send ourselves into a panicked state when we feel like we need to provide all the answers. I think Richard Branson had some pretty sage advice. You know, it's better to not pretend that you know all the answers. In fact, it's probably better to just be clear and to say, I don't know.
Absolutely.
I don't know. We will need to find out. And I think that's in line with the 5 C's as well, because you have to have a heart. You have the commitment to say that we are going to do certain things and we have the measures in place to find out more. But then very important to then follow that up with conclusion and not entertaining too many questions.
Absolutely.
You know, because actually it's back to the topic of care. I think you're actually showing more care. The problem is people can equate care to needing to answer all the questions. But if you are providing the wrong info, and you mentioned, the importance of having facts. If you are providing the wrong info, just in the interest of giving an answer, let's say if it's a tragedy, it's not caring for the family members if they're being fed wrong information or confusing information. So I think that's one way that I have found useful in controlling my emotions. Because if I'm secure in the fact that I know what I know, and there are things that I don't know, and I'm comfortable to just acknowledge that there are things I don't know, you will feel a little less of this sense of imposter syndrome when you're in front of the camera. Any other tools for controlling that?
Let's follow that story. Since we've said that I've committed to meet them at 5 o'clock, day 2. Now we are at day 2.
Okay.
And all the media is already there. Before that, you must already, as you rightly pointed out, during that first day, you would have got enough information, but not all the information. You must be clear what you don't have. Facts, and facts. Stick to the facts. After you stick to the facts, then of course you have to deal with Q&A. The Q&A, there are 2 types of questions they will ask you. There are questions pertaining to the facts that you put out there. And normally you can answer them because those are the facts, most of them. But then there are things on page 2. They will put your questions on page 2. An example. Somebody says, there are speculation that the explosion took place because of arson. Somebody walked inside your factory and started a fire next to the engine room because they knew that's going to cause an explosion. And so what are your comments? And you know that's part of the investigation, but you don't know it's true or not. So you will say to them, the investigation is ongoing. And as far as we're concerned, we know that the fire took place at the engine room, but there are no facts on the table that are found yet whether it's caused by arson. So yours is a speculative question, and I cannot go into a speculative answer to a speculative question. So you must know when it's speculative question, your response is, I cannot give speculative answers to a speculative question. And even they raised you a hypothetical question. If an arson took place there, what is your response to this if it takes place? That is hypothetical. Your response is, that is a hypothetical question. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about the facts of the case today, and we cannot deal with hypothetical questions.
Yeah.
We deal with the facts pertaining to the fire. So do not go and deal with hypothesis, speculative question.
And it's useful to call it out as well.
Call it out.
Because if you don't call it out, I think the importance of calling it out
Yeah.
is it also then resets the frame.
Absolutely.
Both for the person asking the question, but then also for other
Others.
people who might
Yeah.
want to ask similar
Correct.
questions. Because you've already said that I will not entertain this
Yeah.
nature of questioning.
And then another type of question on page 2 that they might ask you is that, what are the compensation that's going to be paid
Yeah.
for the family of the 5 deceased? You can say today, in the first day, in all likelihood, you would not have been able to discuss fully with the insurance company all the details. So you can say they are fully covered. If there's insurance coverage, they are fully covered. But as regards to the detail, that will have to be worked out with the insurance company. Certainly on day 2, I can assure you today, do not go into a quantum discussion about compensation at that point, because it's unlikely that those things would be able to be settled in the first day. You just say that they are fully covered by insurance. The quantum will have to be discussed further with the insurance company.
Yeah. So, I mean, the basic essence of this is, it's better a few well-considered words than
you
many
have to be
ill-considered
prepared.
words.
And another one, Leon, is that there may be a very combative interviewer in the crowd, and that person keep asking the same question.
How do you neutralize
And
that?
so your response will always be, so-and-so mentioned the name. I said, Alan, you've asked many questions on the same subject many, many times before. I have answered your question to the best of my ability today.
Yeah, that's good.
Do you have any other question? That's what you do, deflect it. You said, I have answered your questions on that subject to the best of my ability today. Do you have any other question? Normally, the person doesn't have. And if I pause for a while, you turn to the next, any other question from the crowd.
Let's talk about now the operations.
Yeah, sure.
How does that look like now
Yeah.
in practice? We've talked about the communications. Let's
Right.
talk about how does that now work in practice?
When
How
you
do we
apply
do
the
work?
SOP lah.
And maybe we can draw a specific example to, I suppose, the most recent real case study where you had to deal with a crisis, and that was the reshaping PEMANDU Associates, a consulting firm,
Yeah.
during the time of the pandemic.
Yeah.
That was very much it was a global crisis
Yeah,
that we
it's
were
a global
facing
crisis. So-
with massive implications to the business.
It's a very big thing. So the first lockdown, when it happened, COVID-19 happened in the whole world, and everybody is talking about lockdown. And Malaysia had declared MCO. That was March 2020. So I had gathered the team immediately day one, and we then discussed. That's the first thing to do. I declared the crisis. I told the management team, we have a crisis on hand, because our business model requires us to only keep 2.5 months of cash. Our view is that there is no way that this crisis will go away in 2.5 months. And all our projects were either cancelled or suspended. So we have no revenue coming through because the projects are either suspended or cancelled. And we have only 2.5 months of cash. And this COVID-19 is not going to go away in 2.5 months. Our view then was, in that discussion, it didn't last for more than 3 hours. We said there would be intermittent lockdown. We said that intermittent lockdown will go on maybe for 1.5 years, maybe 2 years, when the world will find an effective vaccine or a cure for it or treatment. In the meantime, because of rising infections, etc., and death mortality, the government will come down and do intermittent lockdown, which is exactly what happened. So then having now done that, we concluded at the end of our 3-hour meeting, the management team, we concluded that we now must communicate this and form a crisis team. So I went there and I gathered everybody in the team and said, look, this is the situation. We're going to run out of money in the next 2.5 months. We have no more cash available. We have now going to declare a crisis. I did the one thing that I have never done before. And that is this. This time round, because it's a crisis that impacts us, and we can't really control this. It's a global crisis. It's almost devastating impact on us. I'm not going to make the decision. Normally, when I lead the companies, I make the call from the management team. No, we don't do it. We do it by vote. For the first time, I've done this. So I told everybody, we gather a team of people, and they need to come and tell us tomorrow or day after tomorrow what are the options available for us to move forward. So we had a working team from top management, middle management, junior staff. They gathered together. Within a few days, they came and told us we had 3 options. Option 1, they said, close down the company. Take whatever cash is available, distribute among everybody, because we cannot survive. Option number 2 is mothball the company. That means close down the company for the next 2 years. Tell everybody, go down and do your own thing. And after the pandemic is over, when you want to come back, anyone that's prepared to come back, come and rejoin. And then we reopen the company. And anyone who wants to return, they can return. That's called mothballing the company. The third option was to do a radical restructuring. That means we halve our manpower, reduce by half, get rid of the office, go virtual, 100%, keep only the meeting rooms. Top management, that me as the chairman or the CEO, I go on 0 pay, no salary for 2 years. The partners, 50% pay cut. The middle staff, 50% pay cut. And the junior staff, 30 and 10% pay cut in that order. So they said these are the 3 options. They calculated that if we do this, each of them, maybe we can survive. And this is the only way we could do it. But in the meantime, when we do that, we start to pivot and do things that have nothing to do with normal consultancy. We have to start doing non-consultancy type of work in the meantime. I then made a call. I said, look, let's do a public vote. Everybody has a vote. I have a vote. You have a vote. Everybody has a vote. And we will do official. We got a lawyer to sign an agreement that the simple majority, 51%, we will all abide by whatever the majority decision was.
Yeah.
So we had all this done. We all signed it. There was a legal document that was signed that means you have no other recourse but to accept the majority decision. So we did it. The majority of the people, 96%, actually concluded they wanted option 3, reconfigure the company. So in April, we finished doing the job. We halved the manpower. We were pivoted. We got rid of the office. And then by the end of...
it was all done very quickly because, for us, we went into lockdown in March.
Yeah, March. In April, end of April, we're already done. We reconfigured the company in 1 month.
Yeah.
That's speed within which we do. Because the reason why we had to do that, we were running out of cash in 2.5 months. We didn't have time to loiter around and think about what to do. It was a really radical thing. So for the whole year and a half.
I think why also it's important to note the fact that we only had X amount of cash is because we also needed that cash to be able to pay the ones who were leaving.
Correct. Yeah. So we had to do all that. So that's the first time I actually went down and implemented a thing like this, the way it didn't require top-down management decision on restructuring a company, and we made a highly democratic discussion about it. I thought on hindsight now, and I think about it, it was a very good thing. And so obviously we started to pivot and do things that's got nothing to do with consultancy. We formed a new company, subsidiary called Prentice Akal. They went into trading, and in 3 months, we built the global COVID index. And that means ranking 184 countries in the world. It's the only index in the world that ranked 184 countries in the world every day, Leon, every day during the entire pandemic. That's approved by WHO. And so we are a team of consultants that have never done programming before. And I told them, look, we've never done programming, and I want us to work on and develop within a short period of time a global COVID index that's approved by WHO that will be able to rank all countries based on data and facts. We tackle every single day more than 10,000 data points. And so that became a very useful tool so that the best practice in the top 10 countries in the world, they can then be shared across the whole world. So we wrote a document called the Pathfinder, Global Pathfinder. And of course, when we did that, we got sponsors. People paid us money for doing it. So it tied us in a little bit of some of the things that we did. But the key here, Leon, is this. We survived the crisis. we totally survived the crisis. And if otherwise, the firm would have died. We survived the crisis. And we became much, much stronger today than we were before because we have half the manpower. We now work virtually. We found an entirely new way of working today. So, subsequent years, and we had record revenue. 2022 and 2023, they were some of our best years in terms of profit. We double our revenue at half the cost. And so, and people can multitask, and there were new way of working. So we found an entirely different way how to do it. And I'm very proud of the team. So I think when I was looking at SSM data that was available in all the consulting firms in Malaysia, the data is available. You can go and buy the report from SSM. We, PEMANDU Associates, among all the top consulting firms in Malaysia, we are among the top 2 most profitable consulting firm in Malaysia. And that's talking about the big players like McKinsey, BCGs, and we are among the top 2 actually. So I'm very proud of the fact that we survived the crisis. We nearly died. And so I'm very proud of the fact that we could do this. And for a small team like ours, in a short period of time that never done programming before, that we could create the global COVID index. And by the way, it won the global award for IT excellence in the world.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I'm very proud of the fact that you can pivot and get the best out of people in times of crisis.
Yeah. That was very special actually to be a part of that. And to witness that, because for the longest time I've always thought we're very good at solving other people's problems, but what would it look like if we had to then solve our own problem? And I think that was a testament to the fact that we truly are able to. Our team is able to really walk the talk, even in our own home ground as well.
But Leon, I want to share something in a crisis that could have happened in the whole country, but we managed to avoid it. And I'll tell you this crisis. When I was a minister in the government in 2012, the gas pipeline belonging to Petronas called Bekok Sea had exploded. That's in Peninsular Malaysia. And that's equivalent to 30% of the gas supply to Peninsular Malaysia. If we didn't find a different way how to manage it, we would have a national blackout in Peninsular Malaysia. Peninsular Malaysia, blackout for the whole Peninsular Malaysia. So we had to radically find a way how to do it. There was an impending crisis, but the whole world didn't know it because we managed to avoid it. So the Prime Minister, having now done and understood that there was an impending crisis, he called me, he said, Idris, I want to appoint you as the national coordinator to avoid this crisis. Do whatever it takes to make sure that the crisis doesn't happen. So I assembled a team of people. So all the chairmen and managing directors of the oil companies had to report to my team. Petronas chairman, Shell and Exxon, everybody had to come. And I was a minister. I had the convening power entrusted by the Prime Minister to do it. We went out to do everything that was ready. I had the team ready, and we had to do all sorts of things, even making sure that is rotational load shedding. That means making sure there's sporadic blackout between
states.
No, between Subang Jaya at this hour and district. Then move it between the various districts and territories, so that you don't have a complete blackout. And we also made sure that big factories that consume a lot of electricity, and we told them we want to involve ourselves in helping you determine the schedule for when you're going to do your maintenance and overhaul. When they do the maintenance and overhaul, that's the best time that they will not use a lot of electricity. So we got to schedule that. And so that when we schedule all of them across the country, the big players like the steel industry and everybody, we told them this date is the best time for you to do it. So we stagger them over a period of time. We had even to make sure that the oil and gas companies can cooperate with one another. We had to do many, many things. And so there was tremendous work that we had to do because gas-powered power plant, there were massive problem with converting them to diesel because it costs money. So if a power plant is running on gas, if you convert it to using diesel, the cost is nearly 3 times more. Obviously, the power plants, they were jumping up and down. So I had to convince Petronas that this is what we needed to do. And the deal we had with them was TNB, Petronas, and government. I proposed then at that time that the compensation for the additional cost is covered 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. The government pay 1/3 of the cost, Petronas absorb 1/3 of the cost, TNB covered 1/3 of the cost. That's very important because the only way you could deal with this was to get diesel to be supplied by the oil companies to the gas-powered pipeline, but it cost a lot of money. And every step along the way, every single day, there was a program for doing the maintenance work that needs to be done for Bangkok Sea. And every single day, I had on my handphone how much gas is going from every pipeline. And so every single day, they report out to me how we were going to do this, to make sure that we don't have this. And this went on for nearly 6 months, Leon. In the meantime, I decided at that time, in discussions with Dato Samsul, who is the president of Petronas, let's make sure this doesn't happen ever again. That's when we decided that we were going to build a regas terminal of Malacca. This is a massive investment, few billions of dollars that Petronas will have to spend on it. So Petronas, at that time, President, myself, and also the Prime Minister, we discussed this. And we think that it's important that Petronas invest the money in doing this. And we have to bring in the state government. The state government, we told them, we want to build this, but it's not on land, but it's offshore. It will be one of the longest offshore bridge that we have, actually, that we put out there, and that's offshore Malacca. So the regas terminal was built so that if ever there's explosion in any of the pipelines, we can import the gas that comes from Bintulu out to the regas terminal and straight onto the pipeline from the terminal straight to the power plants. And I think that was how we solved the problem. I can tell you, after we done all this, Leon, I knew that the peak period for demand for gas was towards the end of the year. Traditionally, the peak demand was going to be that. And we were 50-50 chance that we could go into a blackout in Peninsular Malaysia. At that point in time, I did pray actually very hard because the team have done everything possible, controlling the demand, load shedding, making sure that the big players, we control the maintenance of the project. We did the best we can to repair the Bangkok Sea pipeline, and we began the project to build the regas terminal. I can tell you, I was holding my fingers crossed towards the end of the year, and we avoided the blackout.
I think it's worth talking a little bit more about that, because what you've touched on is essentially secret number 6 of your 6 secrets, and we have a whole series on this 6 secrets. In fact, it's the first 6 episodes of this podcast if you want to go and have a look. But the 6th principle is divine intervention.
Absolutely.
Acknowledging that there are things that within your control that you've already put in place, which is why it's still good to gather all your facts, have all of your operational plans in place. But then actually beyond that, there is also the need to acknowledge what is beyond your control. I've always wanted to ask you, because we never really spoke about this, but how did that play out for you? If we rewind back to the crisis in PEMANDU Associates, when we were facing, the thought of potentially completely shutting down the business, what was going through your mind at that time? We never spoke about this because at that time we were in lockdown, so I couldn't come and have a chat with you. We were just operating always on Zoom. And I remember sitting in that town hall, the Zoom town hall.
This is strange.
And it was the first time where I saw you look visibly quite despondent and a bit defeated. And I've always been used to seeing you able to handle all sorts of things and not really sure. But at that time, I could see that you were a little troubled. What was going through your
the reason I felt like that, Leon, is COVID-19 is something that I never ever imagined that could happen. In a risk-based metrics, COVID-19 never appeared in any of our sheet that such a thing was going to happen. And so the whole world was on its knees. If someone was to tell the world before, do you think in our lifetime the whole world will go through a lockdown? The answer is, I think virtually everybody would say no. That's not possible. The whole world, you can have an epidemic in a particular country, but imagining that a thing will happen for the whole world, the world go through lockdown, it's just not thinkable. So at that point in time, I really realized this was totally outside my control. We couldn't control how fast the world would find a vaccine. And we couldn't control, because it's force majeure. Clients are totally confident in saying the contract says if it's force majeure, we can cancel the contract. There's nothing we can do, And really at that point in time, it is for that reason I concluded I do not want to make the decision, a directive decision on what to do with the company. And I really felt that for the first time, I think I wanted to put it back to the troops, the staff, everybody, one person, one vote. And that I've never done before in reconfiguration. And this is the first time we did it. So in many sense, I was kind of emotional a little bit because the feeling was, if we close down the company, and many of these guys are my friends. We have been colleagues for a very long time. To close down the company, it would have been the first time that in my corporate life I had declared defeat. I said I couldn't turn it around because it was so difficult. And I also couldn't get around to saying that we make a decision to reconfigure the company, that I make the call to do that. And everybody will have to suffer salary cuts. Half the team will have to say goodbye to a very painful process. And so, because we're a very small team that were doing it. So I think the best thing to do is to leave it to the staff, to that we vote. I thought when we made that decision, it was the best decision, collective decision that we made. And if you ask me to rewind the clock, I will still do exactly as we did before. And it's a fantastic way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the fact that you left it up to the team to decide, and and actually in the end there was quite a strong majority that opted for to keep the company going. That I think that is really a testament to the importance of why we do what we do, and the reason why we do this podcast is to not just talk about operationally what are the things that need to be in place, but then actually how do you then build a culture, a legacy culture. We always talk about legacy goals, but then that also transcends down to the culture that we live and the mindset that we create for people. And I think our teams wanted to see a continuation of the work that we have been doing. And I just remember thinking, when you had announced that, I was expecting there to be actually maybe a bit of an uproar in the chat. But I remember that I think people took it really. It was really an emotional time.
It was.
Because I remember as you were saying this, there were a few people who were writing in the chat things like, "Oh, this might be the last time that we gather this together." And some people even started saying early goodbyes. If there are some of you who we won't see anymore, I just want to say it's been really good serving with all of you, and that was very special to observe in there. I wish I could have screen recorded the chat that was going on at the time.
Actually, I do know this for a fact, that people are at their best when their back's against the wall. And during a crisis, I find that if they're led well, you will find the best of those people in a crisis. If they're led well, the highly important if they are led well. The leadership plays a very, very important part in crisis management.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to unpack from this one episode alone, so many principles and things, but I think if there was one thing to maybe take away, and that has certainly been my takeaway from listening to all of this, I think if you forget all the 5 C's, the most important thing to remember actually, and it's the common denominator of all these 5 C's, is actually trust. And just as you were sharing the PEMANDU example, I think that's a great example of that.
Absolutely.
I think the reason why we were able to come out of the crisis stronger than before is because we weren't operating on a trust deficit.
Absolutely.
And I think that's in part because, number one, the team had a lot of trust in you, and that's why we talk about having a very clear plan, being very well prepared as well for different levels of crisis. Because if you have put in the work before the crisis has happened, then you have set a direction, and you have also then created an environment of trust your teams know, okay, we can trust in the process because we have talked about this and we have prepared for this. So there's trust in terms of the teams, trusting the leader, trusting the organization and its processes. But then what's also then interesting in the case of the PEMANDU Associates one is because you create this culture of trust, which might have been slightly more directive at the start in you setting the tone for a lot of things. But because of that trust, you were then able to move into a place where you could then entrust one of the biggest decisions, if not maybe the biggest decision we've had to make as a firm, to completely put that in the hands of the team as well. So it's trust both ways. And I think that's really the secret sauce. There has to be mutual trust. And if you've got a very high level of trust within your teams, I think any team is capable of seeing through and even doing even better and thriving out of a time of chaos, out of a time of crisis as well.
Yeah, I'll add one more to the trust, and I totally agree with you. Once you have the trust and you build onto that, the assumptions, then people are at their best when the back's against the wall. In a crisis, the back's against the wall. You see ingenuity of people coming through once the trust is there and if they're well led.
Well, I think this has been a good conversation. Also, first scoop on this on this story. You heard it here first on GOI. Hey, thank you so much for listening to yet another episode. We really enjoy doing these sessions. This is why we commit to posting episodes every Friday at 6 a.m. so that you guys can listen in. As much as it's a service for all of you, it's also helpful for me as well as I get to learn. And it's just even more of a joy that I can share this with all of you. So thank you so much for listening. You can catch our full episodes on YouTube as well as Spotify. But we also do short form content on both IG and TikTok at The Game of Impossible. Thank you so much for listening and we'll see you next week.